Fuck. All right, we're rolling.
Planet P
presents Cult and Culture Podcast.
Welcome to episode 26 of the Cult and Culture Podcast. I'm Justin Pearson.
And this is Luke Henshaw.
This episode features two of my longtime friends, Cory Linstrum and Matt Anderson, who happen to be in the band End of the Line, which 31G has just now repressed and remastered their 1991 self-titled LP. It's been remixed and remastered. Anyhow, End of the Line was like a very short kind of blip on the map band that just happened quickly. Mainly had members of Heroin in it, and then Cory, from who I was in a band called Brain Tourniquet with, and later went on to be in John Henry West. It's just crazy to like be. I don't know, like it's just crazy to talk about all this stuff from like my childhood and you know, I think when I first met those guys I was maybe 14, maybe a little bit younger, and then I think the first time Struggle, my first band, went on tour, it was with End of the Line, and at my tour, you know, like we toured like California or something, but I mean I was 15 years old. Our friend Rob drove us around, and so it's kind of crazy to just, you know, sort of reminisce about that stuff, but also just to look at things in a perspective of a record and a band that happened in 91 and how hopefully it's still relevant to people. It's definitely relevant to me. I think it's crazy to like just kind of look back at things, because at that time, I mean, I had no concept of what it would be like to be in my 40s, or, you know, have friends that are even older than me, or you know, even knowing what like music is about, or I mean, I was a little kid. I didn't know what was going on. So in retrospect, it's pretty interesting, but you know, and also too, like I think we could have done a podcast with each one of them individually, because Matt Anderson on his own, you know, started Gravity Records, and that's just some insane shit. I don't know. We talk about a bunch of stuff, and it kind of was focused on End of the Line, and we sort of veered off into other avenues of each of their lives. Again, it would have been great to have each of them separately, just to kind of devote more time to stuff pertaining to their lives. But I don't know. It was awesome for me. Hopefully it was awesome for everybody that listens to this. I guess if you're interested in old hardcore, good old hardcore, you should pick up the LP.
Yep.
Cool. Let's dive into episode 26 of the Cult and Culture Podcast. So, yeah, vocal IDs, if you guys can do that.
I'm Cory Linstrum. I was the vocalist friend of the line. How does that sound? Am I need more space, or am I good? Okay.
Matt Anderson, guitar player of End of the Line. If that was what we were saying.
So, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess let's start with the start of the band, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was put together as like some kind of like fuck you to the rest of Amenity, right? From Mike down. Because they started House of Suffering. I think he was like upset about that.
I heard it was more like not the Amenity guys, but like the Amenity fans, like as maybe the Chula kids were saying, Mike's a sellout, and he wanted. That's just what I heard, you know. But I wasn't directly involved.
Yeah.
So that's just what I heard.
But that performance was fucking killer. Like he went nuts, and I was like, yeah, there's no competition there. You know, I mean, that was wild.
Right. It was. I don't know if it was a direct fuck you, but it was kind of
like a competition.
Like, and also he was sort of felt dissed as soon as House of Suffering. I don't want to speak for him, but as far as I understood it, he felt a little dissed after he had been in Amenity all that time and everything he had put into the band, and then they broke up and House of Suffering just came along and everyone was like, oh yeah, let's go. And he felt a little left out, or I'm not positive about that, but he was also done with hardcore. In his mind, he was moving on, and this was going to be his final, like, I'm done, and this is like my like exclamation point
into the line
on top of it. Yeah.
But so it was only supposed to be one show?
It was going to be one show. Yeah, we talked, me and him were hanging out at his house, and he was like, let's do this one show, this band, it's all hardcore, as hardcore as it could ever be, and, you know, it's going to be. And it was in relation to House of Suffering and all those, and Chula and all that, but not as I wouldn't call it a fuck you. It was more like he was hurt or something like that. Maybe a little fuck you, or, you know, revenge, or, you know, whatever it may have been, but it was his one last. It was supposed to be his swan song and his, like,
He went
goodbye to
hard,
hardcore
though.
forever.
I remember just seeing him just go
Yeah.
berserk.
No, it was a cool show. He played that one show for sure.
So then there was the transition where like there was gonna be those struggle into the line dates, and he quit like the first day.
Is that what happened? I mean, I think he did the one show. We were done. And it was like over as far as I remember it. And then we just had fun at the show and liked the band, liked the music, and I just molded over for a few weeks, and we just said, you know what, let's have Cory, or we knew Cory from Brain Tourniquet, and just
I think we were living together by then
In the Claremont house.
yeah. So
I just remember like getting ready, and they're like, Mike's not coming. Like Cory, and you wrote the lyrics like on the way up to LA. To
maybe that's what it was. Maybe Mike was agreeing to do more shows. I'm not clear on that part, but I do know that somehow at some point we just said, yeah, let's just do it.
Cory's
with
got all the
Cory.
artifacts here.
we got this flyer here.
Yeah.
And Cory was vocally fitting the band better.
Ex-Amenity
actually.
singer Mike's new band.
Yeah. So
It was okay. Then that's true. Yeah.
because I remember he quit, and he was like, I don't want to go on tour with a bunch of kids, and like I don't know who that was.
So what I never got was who set those shows up? Is that you?
I just remember someone asked if we'd play this show. I don't know. There was what was it? It was like the Dust Bowl in Boyle Heights. Someone actually died outside that show during the show. Like,
Wow, really?
gang shit. Like someone got shot.
Not related to the show.
No.
Okay.
But someone got shot right outside the Dust Bowl in Boyle Heights, and then we did the Red Barn. And I don't know what if there has to have been like maybe one more.
Oh, San Jose.
So we went all the way up to San Jose.
We went all the way to San Jose, and I got that flyer here. And it's so funny because they didn't even put the date on it. But it's right here. Fuck,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a party
Blat-
in San Jose.
Yeah.
Blatz, Jackacid, End of the Line, They Be From San Diego. Don't forget the Struggle for More Beer, them too. And the Screaming Cunts, the Fabulous House Band. $2 for the keg charge, but there's no date on this. But it had to be the third day, the days right after these shows. You
That's
know?
so crazy. Yeah, so I think there was like 3 shows.
So I don't know who set those up, but that's funny. Obviously, we might have Downcast might have like been responsible for putting this on this one.
They
'cause
didn't play.
Oh, they didn't because maybe they canceled. Engage played. Remember
Really?
Engage
But
from
on that
San
flyer, it says that Struggle is like on Vinyl Communications,
yeah.
which
soon to be on Vinyl Communications Records.
which I don't know what.
So that might have just been something that was like a possibility, maybe that was San Diego talking about or something.
Yeah,
or
I
it seemed
don't know.
logical at the time.
Yeah.
But I kind of recall like this show and the Red Barn one the next night kind of being where we all kind of became friends with Downcast and Kent and Ebullition. Or, excuse me, No Answers, because Ebullition had probably just started.
Yeah. And then we did the Struggle and the End of the Line records with Kent. Like we all, and I remember just like him, Kent, and Downcast kind of like being part of the fold all the time.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff with them.
Yeah.
And so we owe them that as like pulling us out of this San Diego, I wouldn't say obscurity, but like San Diego hadn't taken off yet. We were doing these tiny little gigs. The Che Cafe was like the biggest thing we had going, because we never were part of opening for those Tim Mays shows or Fine Line Entertainment, like at the Carpenter's Hall.
Well, we were too young, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Amenity was like opening those gigs.
Yeah. There was the SDSU back door, which is like where Inside Out and all that shit was
And I kind
happening.
of think Dan Dagan might have had a hand in booking those ones. Remember him? Straight Dan?
Yeah.
He might have had a hand. He was a student there, and he might have had a hand in booking some of that.
But it's interesting because I always felt like we all like never were like cool enough to be part of those things. Like maybe at the Che we would always get shows, but like never other than that. It was always like I don't know. That's how I felt.
We were also. I kind of recall us trying to start like our own new thing, not trying to be like a new thing, but just like an alternative to like those big shows that were so violent and yeah, you had to be connected with the booker. That's why like a band like Santa Claus opened every single one of them because they like knew the dude. They knew it was a guy who, they would open for everybody. You just had to have an in, and then like we kind of started our own thing where we were the in, and it was like. Heroin, Struggle, and even like Pitchfork was kind of like rising above that. They were doing some opening slots. They were playing Iguanas and some big shows.
Oh yeah,
but like
and Force Down kind of was
Force
in there.
Down in there. We were doing, and then those backdoor theater shows at SU were probably the biggest.
They were huge,
shows,
or they seemed huge. Yeah,
of that.
And a lot of that
era.
stuff is just friends.
Oh yeah,
You know, like Pitchfork, Amenity, Force Down. They were of the same age group,
Yeah.
friend group. They were playing the shows. You know, if only so many bands got to play the show.
and they're a little bit older than us.
Yeah, they were. They were about 2 years
Yeah.
older. All those people are. I think we're older. Me and Cory are older than you,
Yeah.
Justin, but maybe by a year or two. And then like the next group up was Amenity and John Reese, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Pitchfork, Trevor Lake Jehu, Rocket. So you know, when you're younger, age makes a big difference.
Fuck yeah,
you know,
it's
and
weird.
a couple years is huge.
Yeah.
So. They were like old men, you know, to us. They were ruling the world, the scene,
they were
everything.
21, so they could play.
And we were-
go to the Spirit. And
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
and see the
Funeral
pumpkins.
March. That was in their same
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
friend group.
Yeah.
And so all those shows, we were kind of aspiring to that, but at the same time, not on so many of those shows. We were doing more
But we got-
garage, Che Cafe. That's why the Che Cafe is so awesome. It always like had the sedimentary levels of everyone kind of went through there, but it always stayed. It didn't age out to a certain scene. It kept renewing itself over and over through the years.
Do you think it was like the DIY aesthetic that wasn't really called that yet, and
Because-
also the all ages stuff?
Right, and also because not one person sort of owned the Che, like the Casbah
Yeah.
or something that got to dictate what happened there.
Yeah.
It was you would just go, different people would just go and put on their shows
Yeah.
there, DIY. So
Yeah.
that's why it was just like a vessel for people to come and go through, not one person's vision or like
Yeah.
Kim May's like the Casbah.
Yeah, definitely what became DIY was definitely what we were all striving for, because we had Vinyl Communications Records here, and that was like a DIY label that we all looked up to. And then we would order Lookout Records, singles and stuff, and that was like another DIY label. And then Mike started Downside right before you started Gravity.
Wasn't that just Vinyl Communications?
Yeah, it was, but it was like, so I guess it would be like a subsidiary of Vinyl Communications if you want to put a term to it. But Bob was helping him put out those records, but it was Mike's vision.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think Mike wanted his own.
little stamp
of,
of things,
yeah.
and he did his, he had his hand stamp and his gray vinyl and all that. His the Force Down 2 7-inches they were handcrafted, and not to say, Vinyl Communications was like definitely folded up and hand done, but like his was just had a little more personal stamp on
Yeah.
it to make it that much more special and cool.
Which I think really influenced at least 3-1G, but I think also Gravity too.
Completely.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, VC, really like what we're talking about, the older people. Bob can't be understated as how important with his
Fuck, yeah.
his shows, his studio, where he had the shows, his studio, recording, his record store. He built up the whole Chula Vista scene, and then Amenity kind of took it from there with the whole crew down there. So they were the bridge that brought everybody in to thinking, making DIY in San Diego so kind of what to do and aspired after. And as far as Downside, I was completely for Gravity inspired by the stamping, and it was just like the next logical. I wanted to just make it more hand done, but the idea was started by Mike.
Yeah.
Really, I mean,
And then it took off across the country and the world. That handcrafted 7-inch on
the
alternative
brown
materials.
bags thing
Yeah.
was like suddenly everywhere. Not the
And then it got crazy. Like, didn't someone put out like a Gunny Sack record, Physics or something?
Through Mile Pilot.
But there was the one crazy thing about that Heroin 7-inch in the paper bag was it was reviewed in Rolling Stone at one point because what's his name from Pearl Jam, who's from San Diego?
Eddie Vedder?
Eddie Vedder
Yeah.
talked about it or
Wow,
something.
I didn't know that.
And it said Heroin, and they didn't have a title, so it was paper bag 7-inch. And so I remember like everyone being like, "What the fuck?" They were talking about Heroin in Rolling Stone.
That's bizarre.
Because he would always cruise around the Che and shit, and like.
Oh yeah, see, I didn't never know that. I didn't even hear of him, until like Pearl Jam was on television and whatnot.
Yeah, I think he was around still when it was like a huge deal.
Oh, okay.
That's crazy. So End of the Line happened by accident, I guess, somehow. Not supposed to be a regular band, but it became. it kind of was going to be at one point, right? Until you had moved.
I wished it kept going. I liked End of the Line a lot. It was going good. I wanted to do more songs, but yeah, it was once Cory left.
I had plans to move out of San Diego roughly by the end of the summer of '91, and it was like San Diego hadn't. Right when I moved is when stuff started happening here. Do you remember we had talked to Bob about trying to open a little record shop in PV and everything, and like if I was going to stick around, that would have happened. But like, I think when I moved, like, I don't know if Rocket from the Crypt had an album out yet, but they were playing houses and stuff, and I don't know if
they played their first show at Dylan's house.
I don't know if Paint as a Fragrance was out yet before I left. Like, nothing had happened. It hadn't took off, like it did later. And
but you were also in Brain Tourniquet.
I was in that too. So that's what I was. We were just talking before you got here, Matt. Like how we met Justin and Jose was like, and then to Dylan, like, and then how I started Brain Tourniquet with Dylan. I don't remember how any of that started.
That was kind of funny.
Kind of met each other at like Che Cafe shows, and like
it's just small.
It was this group of young people coming together to try to start something new going on in our town, because like, the big stuff was unattainable and fizzling. The violence. So the kind of last big hall shows. Well, Scott's Government Issue show with the Riot. And then there was like that XL Blast show that was like crazy violent.
Well, we still had all the neo-Nazi problems.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I was bailing. It was Gulf War. It was like raging, and there was so many like pro-war skinhead like.
And if you go down to Iguanas at that time, it was a complete hellhole. That was scary.
Oh, that's where we would always have to go to see anybody if you want to see Circle Jerks or. Yeah,
it's good that those people didn't know about the Che. I mean, a few skinheads did, but I mean, there were some ones that could have destroyed.
Oh, yes. The only ones we really had were like the Burt and the Boot Boy guys kind of like showed up.
Yeah, they were kind of the junior version of all those people.
Yes, they weren't SDSH, which was real like, probably all in
They
jail
were the Boot
or
Boys.
Dead now. And anyways, I think Amenity was probably the most important band to get us all to like meet each other. Like we would go see Amenity and Force Down a little bit later, but like that's where
Force Down played at my high school. And stuff.
Yeah. So we would go see like Amenity, and that's how you meet people, you know, and like because they played various spots. They would play those big shows. I think the first time I ever saw them was Scream, XL, and Amenity opening, and something like that. And RKL was supposed to play, but they never showed, and it was probably a Scott Bartolone show. That's Tied Down, if I remember, so long ago, but.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Mission Bay.
Mission Bay.
Heroin played there too. End. Heroin played with Struggle there.
Yeah.
And we put that show on, and they wouldn't let us write the word heroin on the flyer.
It had Harry on or something.
What school was that?
Mission Bay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'd have that problem a lot where they would misspell it on purpose. Because
but then I went to Muir with all the other weirdos, and then
Inside Out played at Muir.
Yeah,
at the very end. That was a cool
one.
show. It was just
I saw Pitchfork there once too, and it was the first time I saw Pitchfork open a show was before Rick had joined, and then I saw them at Muir. And Rick was in the band, so
wow.
And that time the show with Amenity and Scream and XL might have been a 3-piece Pitchfork opening or playing next to Amenity down low on the bill.
Wow.
If I can recall correctly.
Yeah. So there's like this weird thing though, because Gravity existed, I think, right? And then you in the bio for the End of the Line record, you talk about how there was like this sort of bidding war or interest between Ebullition and Vermiform. Like, why didn't you just do it?
I think Heroin wasn't even on Vermiform yet. I don't think the Heroin 12. Okay.
Yeah. But that 7-inch.
Why didn't we? I don't. That was more Cory remembering all that. I do remember Vermiform like briefly was interested, but Kent like loved us and really wanted to put us out. So and he was more we knew him a little bit better, and we liked Kent a lot. So I don't remember why we made one decision or the other. I think maybe we would have done something on Vermiform later.
But I meant, like, why didn't you just do it yourself?
Oh, why didn't I was just because it was exciting to do it with Ken. I don't know,
because he was kind of the shit.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I think they were bigger than Gravity.
Yeah,
so it was like a step up
definitely.
in that way.
The way I recall, and that bidding war is just kind of like a tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah,
it's because like looking back at this, you have fun with this kind of stuff and make it sound bitching, you know. And this is how I remember that happening. Is there was some gigs that we played, and this was one of them. This is the first. No, that might not have been it because this is the one with Mike. But there were some shows we played, end of the line shows, and then there were some Brain Tourniquet shows, all kind of happening at once. And then my brother was like, I don't know if I went somewhere, I was out of town or something. I came back and Seth was like, man, I heard the word is that Vermiform and Ebullition both want to do 7 inches for end of the line, or records for End of the Line. And I was like, wow, you know. And then it was like, and I think Matt chose to go with the full album on Ebullition because it was bigger, and we might have known it was limited. We had limited time, and we just wanted to document
I think
everything.
that's what it was Sam was just going to do a 7.
Yeah, it's like, do you want to document
12.
4 of our songs, or like 10 or whatever we had, you know?
Also at that time, I feel like, and I don't know how Kent and Sam feel about this, but I feel like those 2 labels, Vermiform and Ebullition, were both like the shit, you know?
Oh, they were.
And maybe like not a competition again, but like something was like.
And it all coincided with how we were feeling in San Diego. So we were getting all these kids together with Struggle and Heroin and Into the Line people and whatnot, and Brain Tourniquet. We were doing these shows, and then all of a sudden we find out about these other bands kind of playing this same like new take on hardcore. Not new as in like we're doing anything innovative, although we did, but we just like we were doing it for like a new generation of hardcore people that were like, because like say take New York hardcore for example, it was like In Effect Records was all like kind of, there's nothing personal about that, and then you had the Circle Jerk signing to a major, or all these bands were just kind of like, or even Instead being on Epitaph, like it was just kind of like removed from the down in the street scene. Where we were playing these sweaty little packed places, and it just, it was ours. It was our own. And then we had like that Dear Jesus fanzine came out with the Born Against single, and then No Answers came out with the Downcast 7-inch, and we were just like, oh, dude, well, this is it right here.
Like a new.
And then of course, like Born Against comes out to San Diego, and they played at my parents' garage
that was one of the greatest shows I've ever been to.
Yeah,
in my
that
life,
was
was
and we
Born
were just
Against
like,
in your garage. Yeah,
with
shit,
No Escape. Played,
and we were
which
like,
became
this is
Dead
sick.
Guy, and
this is sick, like this is it.
Yeah.
And then there it was for us, like we don't need to like deal with promoters or any of this stuff. We just have to play and make it happen. And then in our case, Ebullition came to us with this record, and it was like kind of like, wow, we don't have to do it ourselves.
Oh yeah.
It was DIY, but it was like someone else DIYing it.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing, because I also think like we didn't know it at the time, but in retrospect, it seems like all of the stuff that was happening was like you. I think you said the word personable or more personal, but also it was like we were more socially conscious, and it wasn't like macho bullshit. Like
exactly.
I think
precisely.
And maybe it was already kind of happening with like Born Against and like even like the New York scene with like Nausea and stuff like that. Like it seemed like that was already kind of there with like sort of anarcho crust stuff. But in San Diego, everyone seemed like more artistic, and
that's based on drinking too. Like a lot of those bands were kind of like drunk punk, or even Nausea. Nausea's bitchin' band, but like it was more like 40 ounces, blah, whatever. We were just like, and we weren't all, like, everyone in San Diego wasn't straight edge, but those who weren't, it wasn't like it was a booze-based scene.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, we were just, like, into, like, getting the bands out there. Oh, no alcohol at this show? Well, no one's going to drink. You know, that's cool.
Or you drink in the bushes.
Exactly, totally. But, like,
yeah.
We weren't, no one wanted to ruin our scene.
Yeah.
We really cared about it, actually.
Except Bert.
Yeah.
Yep.
No offense to Bert, but he did try to put out a Struggle record like 10 years ago, and I was like, there's no fucking way, like reissue the Struggle. I was like, there's no way, dude. I've been beat up way too many times by you. Like, there's no fucking way.
I saw him pop up in that Amenity reunion video at the Beat, and
supposedly he said sorry for all that, but
he did apologize.
Still,
yeah. I just think like, I can't have someone put that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to
beat up, I think at least 2 of the members of Struggle.
Right, exactly. And one thing I remember about the early 90s stuff is hardcore, maybe all the people, like we were saying, the different age groups, they were even fading out. And the early 90s was considered, at the time, all of our groups of bands, and even Gilman and East Coast, Born Against, a kind of a revival or a second wave of hardcore.
Which was
that was
actually
what it was
probably
called at the time. Like
Yeah.
people were literally saying that.
When it was probably a third wave or
Yeah,
fourth
probably-
wave by then, actually. But yeah,
Probably actually, but like
Yeah.
it had never died through the 80s.
No,
And I think
hardcore
it
lived
kind
forever.
of, but I
Punk and
kind of think it was fading, like in the late 80s, and it was either metal or whatever it was had turned into or had gotten so big, but like the true small grassroots level band, there was like a wave, and maybe it was like third wave, who knows, but fourth, fifth.
Around this time, I remember Agnostic Front played Iguanas.
Oof, and someone died.
And on their live at CBGB album with the two boots on the cover, and it was like that was just like no one was in out of us. I mean, whether we bought that or listened to it or not, but like that wasn't what we wanted. We didn't want that big packed hardcore bloody show. We wanted like to look out, whether you're a band or the audience, and just see your peers, friends, and right around. You know what I mean? It wasn't. We weren't trying to be elitist. We just wanted to be open and like comfortable in our environment, and not have the fights.
Yeah.
And
and
not
part of
have
that
the
is-
divider between audience and
that got amplified by
musician.
the fact that San Diego was so violent
Yeah.
that maybe you wouldn't have that desire as much somewhere else. But in San Diego, it had been so violent through the 80s. I didn't go to shows in the early 80s, but it was late 80s, and it was scary and wanting to just have nothing to do with that. And you did have to hide away. That's why the Che was perfect for that. It was completely hidden away from all those old school people because they were at the Iguanas still, and they probably would have showed up at somewhat bigger shows. And I remember that one dude that came along and like threw you against the car, and that guy was scary as hell.
Oh, Mattress?
Was from
No. It was at a Monsula show in some kind of, I forgot what neighborhood it was in. It was like a community center. Probably
San Diego?
it was in North Park.
It's San Diego. It was kind of one-off venue. Maybe they had one show. Well, that's not true. Actually, I saw another show there. I saw.
The Ilano Club.
It was some kind of art center. The only time I saw that, I saw Milo Ackerman and that woman from Night Soil Man and some other people do an acoustic show there.
Oh.
And it was and then there was the Monsula show there. And this guy, the rumor was I can't remember his name, but he had just got out of jail, and there was this girl who came up and she like whispered to me, "That guy over there has been hitting on me all day." And I just happened to look over, and the dude made eye contact with me, and I was like, "Oh, dude, that's it." And he came over and roughed me up, and I had to get rushed out of there, for he like pummeled me to death.
I remember what he said. You had red hair at the time.
Ronald McDonald
he said,
looking
you Ronald McDonald looking motherfucker. And he,
I basically had the
slammed
same
you
hair
down.
but red.
and I ran to the car, and we had to escape the show from that guy. He was like the scariest.
I was sore the
hugest
next day,
dude.
but I didn't have any visible bruises.
Yeah.
He picked me up and threw me onto a hood of a car.
Yeah, he like ragdolled him onto the top of a car.
Yeah.
That was like pretty common in San Diego.
All the
Yeah,
time.
All the time.
Just not to me until that night.
Yeah, and it's nothing against like Cory not being tough. I mean, the guy was enormous,
Oh, yeah,
and we
yeah.
were tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the at least two times I can recall Bert beating me up, I was sitting down and as he started kicking me, and I'm like, that's not fair. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because one of the things that made me that I thought about was like when you look at a lot of those photos of the Che, a lot of them, like even of Into Line Playing or Heroin or whoever, you can see all of the other people that were in other bands in the audience. So you can pinpoint all of them in there.
The first row is all our friends.
Yeah.
And then what actually stokes me the most is when you see someone you don't recognize and you're like, that kid right there, man, maybe he just walked into this right tonight, and then he's going to the Che for the rest of his,
Yeah.
career as a music fan.
Yeah.
Whatever you call it.
But I mean, it kind of reminded me of like that scene in 24 Hour Party People where they're talking about that Sex Pistols show, and they're like, in the crowd was like the Buzzcocks and the Damned and whatever, and the Clash or whatever. Like that kind of makes sense in a sense. Like where you look at it and you're like, oh, there's all these people from these other bands.
Yeah.
Right.
And you could
Early
go back to
times
the
of
East
scenes,
Coast.
It's
yeah.
like that.
Like
Yeah.
John Hiltz's basement on the East Coast must have had a same vibe.
Totally,
It's
yeah.
just like, psh.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
it
was what was
was,
special about that. And then, I mean, that's also, music is what has kept, like, we haven't seen each other in 10, 15 years, whatnot, but, like, obviously music is what's keeping us, like, in contact and here we are today.
Yeah.
Well,
it is kind of weird because I was saying how like there was a thing on Bandcamp that they did on John Henry West, and I was like, oh, this is crazy that it's like very well written and cohesive article, and the fact that it's on Bandcamp for like whoever millions of people, I was like, this is this is crazy that, like, not that it shouldn't happen, but like it shouldn't have happened, and it's so cool that it is happening, you know. And I think that was how we started talking about Into the Line, I suppose, you know, which...
Yeah, Tony Retman, he's written the New York Hardcore book and the Straight Edge book and the Why Be Something You're Not Midwest Hardcore book. He wrote that, and I'm still saving up to send him his paycheck for writing that. Can't afford his fee just yet.
You mean writing the
Yeah,
John West part? Yeah.
No, he's a great guy, and I was really stoked that he wrote that. And I think he was throwing out the idea. He wanted to do some kind of thing about I think he calls it basement core scene or something, that what we call that small scene.
Yeah.
And he wanted to write something about that, so I pitched that towards him, and he was like, thought that was a great idea.
I mean, we didn't have basements out here, so we were just
we did the garage or the house.
Yeah,
or
It's
the
a lot
backyard.
harder to be in a band out here because you don't have a basement. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it's just a lot hard. But the reason we had, I think, for San Diego especially, like we always had to just do weird shit because it wasn't like we didn't have it set up where it was easy. You know, we were just like, oh yeah, we're gonna play all these bizarre ass shows.
Well, I remember seeing like Funeral March and Sub Society in backyards.
Yeah.
Or Dark Sarcasm, you know, like in a backyard.
Yeah. Or
Or
the
a front
roof
yard.
of KSDT.
Oh no, I missed that big gig. There was that one with Jawbreaker, Sam I Am. Did Heroin play?
Sub Society played.
Oh, and then Seth's band, Drift.
Oh,
They
yeah.
might have been called Guiding Line, and that was probably when Mark Marino was still in the band. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah, because they played that gig. And I think I was on the Amenity tour. I did 2 tours as a roadie with them, and I was gone for big chunks out of summers, and I missed that show.
Yeah. Luke, when you were in Chula Vista, where did you kind of like come into like the hardcore stuff? Was it like the Kids and Chicken Farm? Because that whole scene was like a little bit after all.
I had heard of those bands, but they had a lot of friends. The folks from the band Black Fork, I think, were Chicken Farm buddies.
Yeah. Oh, Black Fork was a big Bay Area band.
Yeah, and they would come down here and maybe play TJ with them and stuff. And what is the main guy from that band that has come up to the Bay Area? What is some of the people's name in that band?
Who
in Chicken Farm and
Ubaldo.
oh, that's the guy. Ubaldo, is friends with Cyrus from Black Fork and his partner Rameli. They are friends with him.
Yeah. Well, it was always strange because there was such an important Chula Vista like vibe, but I felt like we were kind of, I don't know, we all lived in Claremont. And,
Well, that's
you
the
know,
thing is Chula Vista had the DIY thing going because of Vinyl Communications and Amenity. Because me and Seth used to drive down when we lived in Claremont. We would drive down there and see shows in Vinyl Communications records or Bob's
house.
back
Yeah.
studio and
Yeah.
see anything. There's nothing going on up here.
Yeah.
We would go down there. Sometimes there'd be something at UCSD.
Yeah.
Like that was not.
But then there was like Unbroken, which was kind of had Rob, from Chula Vista,
Yeah.
and then Santee, and there was such a weird mix of
So
stuff.
by the time Unbroken started, I think I was gone, but I had seen them when I've come back to town to visit. But when I lived here, Rob was drumming for Caustic Humor,
Oh.
and they almost had a 7-inch on VC, I think too. But yeah, they were not. They were just a punk band, punk hardcore-ish band. They didn't have like any straight. Rob was a straight edge guy, but like the rest of the band, I can barely remember. Remember they had a rad guitar player who might have had a Mentor's sticker on his guitar or something.
Yeah.
They actually played a big giant show, the No for an Answer hard stance headfirst gig down the big Chula Vista show that was down here.
Outdoor.
No, it was indoors. This is some hall, and Caustic Humor opened.
Oh, okay. So there's 2 things that I want to ask you guys, and they have nothing to do with Into the Line. But so one was, Cory, at one point you were like maybe gonna book this Gigi Allen show. Do you remember that? And like it was right before Gigi died, and you were like, they need a backup band. He just got out of jail, and then he doesn't have a band, and you were like, Brain Tourniquet, and it was right before you moved.
I don't remember that, but I do remember. Right when I moved, he came down and played the Spirit Club, and
It was after that because I went to that show.
I don't recall this. I remember he came up to San Francisco.
And you were trying to book it at the Alano Club in South Park, and I was like, this is fucking crazy. Gigi Allen.
You sure it wasn't Adam Eisenberg doing this?
I don't know. Maybe he was booking it.
Maybe
but
it was Adam.
But you were like trying to get Brain Tourniquet to be his backing band, which is funny because I was like, what are you going to do in the band? You're the singer too.
Yeah, I'll just manage. I'll just manage this.
All right, so that's a weird one.
Yeah, no, I don't recall that, but I wish I did, and I wish it happened.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting thing to have been part of. I do remember when he played at the Spirit Club, Adam Eisenberg, I was talking to him on the phone, and he's like, dude, we went to 7-Eleven right after the show, and Merle was there, and we met Merle Allen in the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
But,
Rob and I went to that Gigi show and watched from the door, and it was so fucked.
Yeah, there's that famous photo of John Reese with a picture of
shit everywhere.
Yeah, I heard that. There's a picture of John and Gigi, and like it's just like, above the neck. But I heard like below the photo unseen was all the shit all over Gigi.
And no clothes. Yeah. I guess I probably would have posed with him with shit on him. Just
shit. I know.
Yeah. So the other thing is too is like if it's cool, I'd like to talk a bit about Gravity because it seems so in retrospect it's so insane how it happened and where it went and how massively important I think it is and had become. And I know maybe you try to like when we've talked about this in the past, you try to skirt away from like talking about it, but it really changed the landscape for a lot of people. And I think like I would love to know how you even came up with some of these ideas. I mean, obviously we were borrowing or influenced by Bob and stuff like that, VC and even Mike Down with the rubber stamps, but like it took off and like became just so crazy as far as the aesthetic.
Right. Each new record I just tried to talk with the band and maybe give them some ideas and just wanted to do each new thing different. And so, we did the silk screen. A few records got silk screen, but we wanted to use different paper or what else can you? It's just out of trying to make each one a little bit different that you had this variety of stuff. And then
spray paint.
Right,
or whatever,
spray paint. And then like even the Antioch Arrow had actual paint on it. In the first, they all stuck together, so I had to stop doing that. But like the very first In Love with Jet records had actual like rolled on paint, red paint, and then we silk screened over that, but it just was too hard to do.
I had the red one, and I remember putting it in a poly bag.
It stuck.
Yeah, those are all ruined. Yeah, those all have to be just ruined. Yeah.
But it's like it seems so crazy to be like, what? Like, why? How did you? It's such like a basic thing that you came up with,
Right, the way things just kind of evolve. Once you have this idea, it just mushrooms out from there. Where you're like, okay, well, what else? We did that. Let's do something else. You just have to keep thinking of new ideas, and it did catch on with other labels and other, at the time, to this, and it helped. It really made it look DIY. It had that personal feel where it went along with the music in that way, the vibe of the music. And the thing with Gravity, though, it wasn't just the packaging that was DIY. I was also recording the bands, and down to every little element. And in my mind, it was because I was somewhat cheap and wanted, records are expensive to do, and I wanted to keep the costs down. So I was like, well, I'll just buy a recorder. I'll buy a 16-track, record the band. So some of that made it hurt. Like the recordings aren't so great because of that. It's bassy. I'm mixing a thing. I don't know exactly how to mix things. It's a cheap little studio. So in a way that I feel like that's maybe a negative side, the way some of the recordings turned out because of that. But
every recording engineer or producer did their first recording at some point.
But I did multiple records, like not that great. But some of them sound fine. I think the like Earthless record and Man is the Bastard, those turned out great. There was a certain few that really turned out okay, but it was more just trying not just to save money, but it was that same DIY, just taking what's the next DIY thing you can do. It was like down to packaging every single record. It's just what it is to run a DIY label.
But that's crazy because even Cory brought up, like, he was like, how did, or one of you guys were at, maybe you asked me, you were like, where did we record it at? Or where are the reels? We shared a reel. And I remember Struggle and Interline recorded at this like studio. It was the first time I've ever recorded, and it just felt so weird to be in this rock place. And I felt like they were looking down on me, and like, we didn't know what we were doing. I was fucking 15, and I was like, I didn't know.
Rock dude, he probably all of our bands
talking a bunch of shit, and you're like, this is weird. And so then I remember like you had a 4-track, and the first Gravity thing was like that Slug brain turning cassette.
Well, one thing about producers, and Jeff Forrest was always cool and But the first time he described Antioch Arrow as a semi rolling down the highway on its side. Like he hated it, when he recorded it.
But that sounds like a compliment.
Yeah, maybe it was some kind of a compliment.
I mean,
It is now, yeah.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I feel like if Jeff said that, it might.
I feel like it was not in a way, but at that time, I think he warmed up to all of our stuff.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, he wasn't as into it. But yeah, the 4-track thing, the very beginning of Gravity, before I'd really done anything, the very first thing was supposed to be the Amenity last shows. I was going to do a flexi.
Oh.
But the tape never materialized, so I couldn't do it. But I have art and everything. I had a ready to go release, just waiting for their tape that Mike said existed, but it never happened. So that was going to be Gravity number 1, and then I think it was going to be Brain Turn Against Slug as number 1 instead.
And they wouldn't press it because there was too many fucks.
Well, also the audio. I mean, there was cussing, and also the artwork had kind of death, like dead bodies on it and stuff. So they rejected it for that.
Yeah.
But we did the tape. But that was the first time I met any of you guys, not Cory, but all you guys.
Yeah.
Dylan and you.
I wasn't on that recording, but
I know, but you were there at the recording.
Yeah.
You were there
in Dylan's house.
Yeah, you were at Dylan's. It was like
I remember cutting the vocals at our place in your bedroom, the garage bedroom, and freaking out the neighbors, kind of, because it was just like
for someone yelling,
screaming just by myself.
Yeah,
and we had it going through a PA. It wasn't going like direct. It was just like such just screamy vocals only. So did we record that in Dylan's little basement room?
I remember being there.
He had that great room down there.
Yeah, which was like, I mean, that's where Rock from the Crypt played their first show, I guess.
They had that sliding glass door that went out to the yard. I've got some photos. Actually, I don't know whose they are. Someone put them online, but they're of all of us hanging out in the backyard, and dusting and whatnot. Some of the, girls from back then. I can't remember who was in this picture, but it's great pictures.
Yeah. So that's crazy because the Gravity thing happened, and it just seemed, I mean, it totally influenced 31G 100%. And it was kind of funny too, because I guess now, like you're saying, you had left before Unbroken started, but I remember the first 31G release was an Unbroken 7-inch, and it was my goal. I'm not in the band, I'm not in Unbroken, but but the thing was, like, they were like, we want you to put the 7-inch out, and they had like only done stuff with new age records, so everything was like shiny and glossy, and I was like, and so at that point I had only been in Struggle and done like Kent's style, and I was like, cool, I want like the shiny glossy, seems like professional, like let's do that. And I remember Eric Allen was like, there's no fucking way, fold over cover, rubber stamp, I want it to look like shit. And I was like, what? Like, that's so crazy, man. And he wanted to make it San Diego, he was like, make it fucking look like, arts and crafts, or what. I don't think he said like shit, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he wanted to make it look like that DIY thing.
Right.
And I was like kind of secretly bummed. I was just like, what the fuck? And then he would like glue shit on them and like write, secret messages. And I was like, damn, man, this is like, but that
and
really.
Maybe by then you didn't want to just, Gravity was already there. I don't want to just have a brown bag on it now. It's like,
I don't think Gravity was Gravity at that point yet, because I don't think like.
Well, I know it wasn't like as big, but still, like the Heroin 7-inch was out. You probably didn't want it to just look like, or a few other records.
So
you probably didn't want it to just,
Well, I feel like there was like the Heroin 7-inch in the paper bag. There was the Struggle 7-inch, which was like everything Ebullition, like in a booklet, and then there was.
But they had a good look, that
totally
clean black and white look.
Totally like crass or something, which I thought was always cool. But then there was like this shiny new age, professional, like major label kind of look, and I was like, I don't know, like
UV
I think that's
coated.
And now I fucking cringe at anything that's got gloss or cover, but it was, and I'm glad that Eric pushed it in that direction, because but I think also too, like with the Gravity stuff,
that's more like an old, to me the Unbroken looks like an old school hardcore record from the 80s or something, like
to me it seemed like the Force Down 7-inch,
just like that, or like men, just how just the fold over black and white, not Xerox looking, but just printed, just like
or kind of bootleg ish,
kind of like that. A lot of 80s hardcore 7-inches have that look,
which is a very awesome
classic
vibe
looking thing. It's good,
But I guess like in the 90s, you didn't have the like that aesthetic, didn't have nostalgia or something yet. Right. You're just kind of like, that was like what the bootlegs looked like or whatever, and I wanted to present something professional.
You know who did that on a great was that label Simple Machines. They were doing offset presses on like 3 colors on and just interesting looking stuff. That was some interesting looking stuff. But it was obviously run through offset printers and stuff, and so was some of your stuff too.
So the End of the Line record's a trip because it was essentially a bunch of recordings just thrown together, and then Kent released it. Do you know how many pressed or anything, or how?
I
would say 3,000 or something. I mean,
that many?
I don't know. That guy, no one knows.
Yeah,
and
I
I
know.
don't think they know. You know, they're
I've heard
their
crazy.
bookkeeping is. I don't think they did any bookkeeping that was like. At least they never showed anything to me.
Yeah, or
You know-
or anybody. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I heard crazy numbers for struggle shit, and I was like, this is crazy. But then when this came up, I was like, End of the Line, this will be fucking rad. But I was like, damn, I wonder if everybody has this record or.
Oh yeah, did you see there was some criticism like when we posted about it, like you can still find this in every record store, you know, stuff like that. But it's like, you know what? Who
But
cares?
you can't.
you know,
What record stores are they going to? Because I mean, I haven't seen it in
or in the used bins is maybe what this comment.
but I
said.
still haven't
Yeah.
fucking found it. I mean, maybe
I've only seen it. You know, I've only seen it used a couple times in all these years.
and part of me feels like that when someone's selling it or looking over it, they don't even know what it is because it is a pretty obscure band.
Whenever I would see it in a used bin, I'd always like put it up on the like display, whatever record store I was in. So like maybe someone walk by and catch it with their eye, like whoa.
Well, I went to Vinyl Junkies the other day and I brought a couple copies and I was like, this is coming out or this month or whatever. Like, let's get some into the store. And Rob, the clerk there, he's awesome. He's a bit older and maybe from like a slightly different scene or whatever. Was like he didn't know what it was, but he was like, is this San Diego? And he's like, oh, Gravity. And like he kind of like quickly caught on to what it was, you know. But like he knew. Just based off of like me not even saying anything, he got on the right path of what it was. I was like, oh, that's fucking cool. Maybe you have to be from San Diego to really kind of get that.
Yeah, we didn't. So it took like not only did we finish as a band before it was even like close to being
Yeah.
completed, then he sat on it because there was no urgency to get it
Yeah.
out. So it didn't come out for like 2 years or something after we recorded it probably. And I remember. Well, I was in Epicenter one day when that "Give Me Back" came out. The band was already broken up,
Yeah.
and I remember they put it on in the turntable in the record store. And
That record is fucking killer. By
I
the
heard
way.
myself like, "Whoa!" And then the album came out to like very quietly or whatnot, and then it's just didn't sell. And people, that's the worst record on Ebullition. No, But then you hear like 20 years later, oh, that's the best kept secret on Ebullition or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're just like whatever, but. A lot of people seem to have liked it just because I've been like, as I was telling Justin earlier, it's like social media is what kind of made me aware that people were still listening to or discovering John Henry West. And I would kind of see the same thing with End of the Line and then comments like, oh, this is such a good record, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea that people cared about that still.
Well, it's weird though because I mean I really feel like when someone says what is this, you're like, well, it's got like people from all these legendary bands, and you just list them off, and people are like, whoa. But it takes like that explanation for them.
Oh yeah,
to,
I was hanging out with this dude Aaron who was in the Widows.
Oh yeah,
And he was like, I didn't know that you had a band with these guys.
yeah,
You know?
which is pretty killer in itself.
Yeah, it was cool. I had forgotten that we had done that in multiple studios. I hadn't played the record in so many years, and then this guy who played in a band with Sarah Kirsch, I was shooting the shit with him about something, and he goes, so was that done at like 2 different studios or 3 studios? And I was like, man,
But
I
it
don't
sounds.
remember. I had to
yeah.
ask Matt, like all the details. I couldn't remember anything
Yeah.
about it because there's no liner notes that says like anything about it.
Yeah.
You know?
But there parts of that original recording sound pretty fucking bad.
Yeah, no. Then I as I re-listened to it, I can tell the difference
Yeah.
now. And then and Matt reminded me we did stuff at these different demo studios before we entered. I guess Double Time was probably still considered a demo studio at the time, but
Wasn't in Double Time was still at his house, right, in Santee?
we recorded at a house that had like a sliding glass
Yeah,
door that went out
yeah.
the backyard. But then when we went back to when we had John Henry West did the record with Gravity, we had Matt like in the, I guess the production seat. Jeff Forrest was doing all the mic placement engineering. I can't remember, but we had you in as like
Yeah, that was when he moved to the.
It was
the
like a
still
first
there.
studio.
the studio, okay. And it wasn't really. It was more like a storage unit type spot, if
Yeah.
I recall.
It's industrial.
Yeah.
I think it's still out in that general vibe.
Where is that? El Cajon, Santee? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jeff's, it's kind of crazy to think about him. I'm fucking Jeff, dude. Jeff Forrest. Like, he played drums for Weird Al and shit. Like,
Oh, did he?
I mean, he's got like a pretty, his own personal life is pretty wild. But then he recorded all of like this legendary shit, you know, like all the Gravity stuff and like Unbroken, and like he got the opportunity. I don't want to say like opportunity, like but like he recorded all this really, really now very important stuff, and I think it's pretty wild to think about that.
Well, you know,
He has co-writing credits for Blink 182.
yeah, I heard about that. I think the way that place came about is that there was that thrash band that was from Kearney Mesa, Blind Justice.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They used to do gigs with Sub Society.
Yeah.
And they discovered that place and went in and cut a demo there. And then, I don't know if Sub Society used it, but then Seth went there with his band Drift.
Yeah.
And cut a 7-inch that just now came out. Like, Seth just decided to release it on vinyl. And he hasn't even got the covers back yet. And then I think some punk bands or hardcore started going in there. Probably like El Cajon, like short-lived type bands were using that.
Yeah.
At probably around the same time. And then somehow Struggle and Gravity bands started going in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you guys do your record there?
Struggle
Yeah.
recorded the LP there, and then Swing Kids recorded there, and then
Okay.
it was just the Locust recorded there. It was always recording with Jeff.
Yeah, so that kind of I don't know if he'd agree, but I'd say that put him on the map, like with hardcore. And
At least
punkers.
all of us
Yeah.
in San Diego, everyone
Yeah.
went there. But it was kind of funny, like, because I didn't know, but like, you know, he would just sit there and read and like push record and like not. You need someone to be like, yo, someone's out of tune or someone fucked up, you know, and you wouldn't really know until it was
Well,
done.
that's why I would describe him as
late.
for the recordings I did as an engineer rather than a producer.
No one got producer credit because no one was producing it, you know.
Yeah.
At that,
And that's what happened with End of the Line. Is like, Matt, you did that record on your own, and I don't know, we were probably like 20 at the time and learning. And then that record went through a couple mixes before it became what showed up on Ebullition.
Yeah, which is crazy because I A/B'd the first one and the new one, and it is insanely different. Like the new one sounds very cohesive.
Yeah,
all
I
of them
didn't
do.
even A/B it. I could just when I heard the new
Yeah.
one, I was just like, dude, this sounds like a different record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, completely.
And the interesting part about it to me, and I'm not trying to sell it to anybody here or whatever, or whoever's listening, but like it doesn't sound like a retro. It sounds like a modern hardcore band.
It sounds like it could.
A good
Yeah.
band that doesn't.
Yeah,
I
for
don't-
sure.
Yeah.
It sounds modern, timeless. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the original mix trying to make it just sound really big and bassy and huge, but it just sounds hollow and terrible, and it so didn't do it justice for how kind of aggressive or whatever, the songs were. This new mix is definitely like a drastic, sometimes they remixed it and you can kind of barely tell the difference. This is a drastically different mix.
I mean, you had Tim Green doing it.
Yeah.
He gets it fully.
Yeah,
Because I feel like
that was its biggest thing, is that people would say back, it just sounded like shit.
Yeah.
Whether they were good or not, I remember them, saw them, like the record just did not turn out right.
It was kind of crazy because when you listen to it and there's obviously like it wasn't like the first song sounds the best and then it gets worse. It's like in the middle there's like, oh, that's the best recording, and then then it's a shitty recording again. You're like, what the fuck just happened?
We were just learning. We didn't know how to do it. I mean,
Well, there's the Give Me Back. There's 2 songs that were recorded during the Give Me Back time, but we didn't want to use the same version on Give Me Back, so I re-recorded on 8-track, just so it was a little different. So there's a couple, like, it was recorded at Neighborhood Studios, Bob's, studio, on 8-track, and this other extra song, just so we'd have more songs on there. There's one, like, other 8-track that it's still on the new record is the 8-track, but then we put the Give Me Back song back on because of the other version of the Give Me Back song. What is the song? I forget.
Burning
the name.
Down?
Yeah, Burning Down just sounded so terrible on the 12-inch that we just like scrapped that thing and put the one off Give Me Back on there because
that Give Me Back comp was really important. I think it had like for me at least, that was the first thing I ever recorded on it. And the Struggle song I think sucks, but it was really cool to have my first recording be with End of the Line and Amenity, and then like Born Against and Bikini Kill.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like fucking stacked with crazy
that was cool,
shit.
for
And
sure.
Yeah.
it was such a good recording, a good album through and throughout. And
Isn't like Sea and Red on there too?
Sea and Red is
like
on it.
all that, and that
Man Lifting Banner. I mean, it's got like tons of shit. And the Amenity song on it, I think, is probably my favorite Amenity track that they wrote. And it was just, it was really nice to like, because I mean, fuck, Struggle sounds like, you know, what they had the song "This Is Our Struggle." Like, I don't know, it just seems like an without really knowing, like we were really.
It was nice to have us on this record with these like legit acts that were like we listened to and respected, and so did lots of other people.
But that was the last. No, maybe Amenity recorded that last 7 inch.
Well, I'm just saying for us as San Diego people, like to be on a record with Amenity was cool.
Yeah.
I think that song is on there. That final 7 inch of theirs.
Oh.
Is it Breathe or something?
Breathe. Yeah, that was it.
I can't remember song titles of a lot of this shit.
Yeah.
I barely
so
know
many
anything
years,
of my
yeah.
own band's song titles.
Oh yeah, I couldn't. Yeah.
But so it was cool when you guys wanted to do, because so also too, I think the 3D aspect is rad, and it to me it seems like a Gravity thing, but also the third release or the fourth release, I think it's the fourth release that 31G put out, had 3D printing on it. And at the time, you know, I was when I was running 31G and when I was 19 and 20, I was poor, and so we would just go to Kinko's and steal all the copies, and they had the red ink and the blue ink, and we figured out that you could make fake 3D.
Yeah,
and so
we did that with flyers too.
Flyers, yeah, and it was like everything was like fake 3D, and it was like such a fucking cool thing because it stood out, it grabbed people's attention, especially
love it, yeah.
amongst like, I don't know, whoever, Meatwagon or whatever other flyers, and then you'd be like, then you see the 3D one, you're like, what the fuck is that, you know? And so it was really nice for me and for 31G to like bring it kind of back full circle.
Well, also when you mentioned like
cool.
the bands like Meatwagon or like Insolence, the Mystic type San Diego bands, and there was a lack of graphic design that like was skilled. Everything was so like amateur. Well, Mystic Records was always very like cut out pictures glued on, and that's a whole aesthetic that has its own charm. But we wanted to bring like art back into our imagery too.
I'll just say Mystic Records has no charm. The art is the worst art of any label ever.
It's always black and white, right?
And it's just,
or they have a one
it's
color.
just they just took some other art like from a flyer and just made it themselves.
Yeah.
Like Mystic was making their art for the band. The band had no choice. I mean, that's like. But anyway.
But I think we just wanted.
I guess it has some charm in that way, but
we wanted
our band
stuff
art,
to
that's
stand
probably
out.
the worst.
Well, because like you take Vermiform, like everything was pretty stark black and white, like religious imagery flipped upside down or something, and that's kind of what I wanted with Brain Tourniquet too. But later, as a year progressed and Gravity and 31G like we're moving forward, like art became just as important. You know, with tricky printing or silk screening or 3D, fake 3D or anything. I mean, you went way out with a lot of stuff.
It was ridiculous,
yeah.
but I feel like
and you as well.
I feel like Gravity was too, like that Man is a Bastard picture disc. It's in a sleeve. It's like, why? Like, not like, I'm not saying this like, why did you do this? But it's like, that's such a bad idea to hide the picture disc. But it's so brilliant because when you pull it out,
And it was never advertised as a picture disc.
Yeah,
it was just
it's
here's their
like-
12 inch, just happens
Yeah.
to be a picture disc in
so
there.
killer.
That was cool.
I think that kind of shit is the best when it's like special and secret. It's because I think maybe at that time too, like we started tapering off from like going and finding stuff. Maybe, I mean, I guess the internet didn't happen yet, but I feel like things were just not as like when you're a kid and you found something in the back of Max and Rock and Roll and you discovered something, it was special, it meant so much more, and I feel like we were trying to find elements that were just cool little artifacts just sprinkled in there and shit, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do wish that like End of the Line was able to keep going.
It's interesting.
You fucked it up and moved away.
That's true, but at the same time, it's like,
It wouldn't have been as special.
well, it's just also because Matt was getting so busy because the Heroin album hadn't come out and your U.S. tour hadn't happened, and that stuff had to happen. And
Yeah.
I don't know if End of the Line would have interfered.
Who knows what would have happened. Yeah.
And then who knows? Like
It had more life in it, but at the same time, I mean.
But it was almost Heroin.
Most bands are.
I mean, End of the Line was like Heroin with Cory singing.
Well, you got to also remember keeping it in the Heroin side of things. Ron was actually the bass player when Mike was the singer.
Yeah.
And then he, right around that time, went on his trip to Europe, and that's how we got Scott into it. The same time me and Scott got in. And I guess we were all living on South Avenue in Claremont, and when I joined, it was like a crash course, and we went out to I remember we went and rented a hourly practice place and practiced like just trying to do it all. And I remember we ran into Delmar Peacher out there in the hall. He was jamming with somebody too. It's just a memory I have of that.
But you did it.
Yeah. No,
One funny thing is we had a whole set of lyrics, you know, no computers or anything, written on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
The whole album's lyrics, and then that piece of paper got lost, so we had to rewrite the entire like lyrics again. I mean, they were somewhat the same because you can kind of remember, but it's funny how like the lyrics completely were, you know, like redone.
I remember
because of the piece of paper.
When
got
I
lost.
joined, we didn't know any of the words Mike sang, and you told me this trick. You're like, well, when we have a new song in Heroin and we're playing it live, and I don't remember the words, I always just go to this thing where I talk about putting an apple on my teacher's desk. Do you remember any of this?
No, they definitely do.
You're like, I just go like, I'm gonna put an apple on my teacher's or something like that, and like I was like, all right. So I just remember like
make up.
You just kind of like start with that. I've got an apple to put on my teacher's desk, and then you just kind of ad lib off that. In this chaotic hardcore band behind you, you can kind of do that. And then I remember like in the car like to this gig like writing lyrics, and then Rop's like helping me write lyrics, and he had given me these lyrics. It's something about forked by a freak or something, and then. When it came to record the album, you were like, "All right, dude, I'm gonna write these lyrics."
Yeah,
I remember
like,
you. God.
I remember you telling me like, and this is no offense to Mike Down, but you were saying like all of his lyrics sucked, and you're like, "I'm not gonna fucking sing that emo shit." I don't know if you called it emo, but you were like,
I don't remember what they were like, but I'm sure they were better than what I came up with. But
really? But
I
you
just
were like a
at the
punker, you know, you were like a nasty punker, and Mike was trying to like wear suits and shit. You know? I don't know.
That was what I'm kind of trying to recall. The time period, was it when Mike was doing his dinners, like the Italian restaurant, the Italian restaurant, and then he did the Chinese restaurant too. And we did those dinners down there.
But I remember he tried to make ties for Downside, which was like his record label, and I was like,
did.
and I feel like we were all kind of just like, fuck this.
It was, you know, he was moving on to something totally different, and that's why he did his end of the line departure, because he was moving out of hardcore, you know, which. You know, I totally did the same. You know, there was a point where I was like, it was like after the John Henry West tour, I was like, I didn't feel like I had much more to like offer into that scene. And like, there was very few bands that were like grabbing me out of those. And the ones that did were the ones who were playing like more of an older punk, like Los Crudos sounded like they could have been like an 81 hardcore band or something. And there was, you know, and I was just kind of getting into different stuff. And when I turned like 21, like, my bands became like, we started playing bars and clubs more than like we still played anything, you know, but like it opened up a whole opportunity. We could play bars now, you know.
Yeah.
And,
I went a long time. I mean, even with the Locust, we never played a 21 and up show.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, I kind of held on to that. It was weird.
And that's great, you know. And also that was, San Diego was also a youth oriented, as well as there was 924 Gilman up there.
Yeah.
But 924 Gilman, it was also like, I considered myself kind of a serious, like, even though I had my sense of humor, I didn't want to be the goof. Like 924 Gilman was kind of goofy punk bands, you know, silly, you know, whatever.
Really?
And that's all funny too. I don't know, you know. I still went there all the time, and I go see my bands. I was always go see Iconochrist play, and there was this band Anger Means. I'd always go see them, and bands like that I clicked with. But I didn't always go see, and no offense to these bands, but there was like Lung Butter and Anal Mucus and all these funny bands that had like kind of, you know, every scene has them. And like, and I'm sure they were all great. And I remember Anal Mucus was like actually so insane. They were more like Man is the Bastard in an insane way because they were so weird.
That's crazy. My vision of Gilman is completely different, because the first time I ever went there was to see Downcast. And Downcast played with a bunch of goofy punk bands, but I went to see Downcast, who are obviously a complete opposite of goofy. And then I remember, like, you know, periodically going there a couple times. Struggle played there, and it was pretty bad or whatever. But going and, like, seeing the Slap a Ham festivals, you know, like, whatever they were, I guess Slap
that was probably curated to use
and then it was, like, all crust, and it was all, like, you know, Man is a Bastard.
So when Jesse Townley from Blatz booked it, he loved to mix bills, you know, with all kinds of stuff. And that was always, like, so we would go play there, like, say John Harris would play there, and be like, oh, we got to, you know, we'd play with Jawbreaker, Born Against, or whatever, and then there'd always be like some silly bands on the bill too, and it was all right. But that's fine. That means you can go outside and chill for a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But there was also bills that were like strong the whole way through. Like I remember seeing Neurosis, Nausea, Iconochrist, Filth, or what? It's like a strong bill top to bottom.
Like stylistically too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe another person booked those. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was always and that was the best. As like, there's nothing wrong with variety, but when you're 20, you want to see like a full set of rad bands. Now I wouldn't even sit through a 5-band.
But I feel like everything San Diego had to have variety because there wasn't fucking 5 bands that sounded like Born Against in San Diego.
I would say looking back, San Diego had great variety because you would have like Antioch Arrow or Heroin play, then you'd have all those other like the Lames and all those kind of bands as the opener type. All the and I'm just trying to remember. There's also this weird 7-inches like rugcore that had like all these trippy bands and like
or like Tit Wrench, like,
of
you're
course,
just like,
Tit Wrench.
Like that but it made sense, you know.
For sure.
That's San Diego though, I guess.
Here's a funny San Diego memory of mine, and I struggle playing a giant outdoor stage at Mission Bay and like Vacation Village with Joe LaBiafra doing spoken word.
Yeah, it was Campland on the Bay, and it was with Daddy Longlegs played too.
Oh yeah, how could it?
Yeah, it was crazy because there's fucking Dylan and Jose like yelling about communism and shit. And I'm like, dude, we're at like a campsite at the fucking Mission Bay. Like, my mom is here. Like, she doesn't care about like.
Oh, that was a Bob Barley for Mayor event, was it?
I don't think so. I wish it was, but I don't think it was.
Maybe that's something else. I remember Jelly came down and spoke at one of those.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can probably wrap it and just.
Oh, well, real quick, let's give a shout out to Mike Down because, as him being the first, vocalist for End of the Line, like, we all had great respect for him,
Fuck yeah.
And I'd have to say that like he is responsible for. I was hanging with him. We both lived in PB, and he took me up. He had told me, he's like, I ran into Scott Bartolone from Tied Down Productions at Mesa College, and we're going to go hang up with him. I guess he lived in Encinitas or something. And we cruised up there, and then Heroin was just finishing band practice, and you guys all came out. It was when Chad was on singing. And I remember Ron coming out with this punk spiked belt and stuff, and like I was just like, whoa, who are these guys, And that's when I first heard about the band, and we were hanging out with Scott. I don't know if we hung out with you guys. Shortly afterwards, then you guys opened for Amenity way down in Chula Vista at like the Amenity studio where they built that stage. And then I think that's when we all became tight.
Yeah.
And then it must be around the same time that we became tight with you and Jose and Dylan and Cliff and everyone.
Yeah.
All of these, that's where like, and I think that's, I have Mike to like thank for introducing all of us together. And the other thing about Mike is I watched that End of the Line footage of us at the Anaconda that Ron came with, and my stage presence is just like Mike Down. I'm like, holy shit, I look just like I'm moving just like Mike. All the like, jerkism. I'm like, oh, I must have been like the guy I watched the most live, because you had videotapes back then of watching bands, but you would always be watching like Flipside video, and it was like the generation before us, and then like, but watching right up front into was always, I guess it was Mike, because like I thought I was moving just like Mike, and eventually I got
right.
my
You
own.
didn't know that at the time.
No, because like, and then looking back, and then of course I got more into I would hope my own thing, or I was biting somebody else, or whatever. But I was fully biting Mike Down at that, and even when he quit End of the Line, he was. I know you were tight with him still, But I remember going down to his apartment and like, we would go down to when he was promoting those restaurants, and I was always trading records with him in our apartments. Like we had records out on the floor. We were always trading and I remember I ended up with a stack. I don't know what I traded for him, but I had like a stack of SSD. The kids have had their say bootleg 7-inches, and I had them. It was like 6 or 7 of them, and I was just trading them for years. And I'd always like pull one of those out when I needed to trade something. And I kind of recall trading the first ever Smashing Pumpkins 7-inch to him. And I was at KSDT radio, and like this promo package came, and I fully intercepted it and looked in. I never heard of this band, and they had sent it out to college radio, and I snagged it, and then I traded it to him because by the end, it got rare pretty quick. I think But anyway, it's just a little memory.
But he's a trip because I mean, for me it was always like, and Amenity and Force Down, like there was so much like style involved, and like the nuance of him being like punk was really, really important. I remember fuck, man, when I was like probably 12 years old or 13, he worked at Slash and Crash Records.
Right on. I remember that place.
With Rob from Force Down. And yeah, I went into like just, like a shitty skater, and I was like, I don't know what it was, but I was like gonna buy a skull ring or something, and they didn't, none of them fit me, and I was like, oh, I'll just take that Iron Cross, and he's like, do not fucking wear that shit, and I was like, what? And I didn't know, and I was like, it's Darby Crash, like he wears it, and he's like, it's racist shit, and like, and then he really fucking got me on that path, like the sort of like political stuff and being like vegetarian and like just really kind of like honing in on a lot of, I think, socially conscious stuff, which I felt lacked in punk and hardcore at that time.
Well, definitely in Southern California, hardcore it did. You know what I mean?
Totally.
There was little pockets, like Long Beach had some crusty bands and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like there was an Iconoclast from, I don't know, north of Los Angeles, but like Amenity definitely had that going, and they'd always play benefits and stuff, and that made us aware of all kinds of stuff,
And the whole all ages thing was really
Oh,
important.
he was so strong about that music is for all ages, his stickers and shirts.
Well, because I fucking missed out on tons of shit. Like, I was like, I missed everything.
Oh yeah, I remember sitting out the back door of the Spirit Club. We'd sit out there and listen to 7 Seconds, listen to Bad Religion, or whatever. Everyone came through, but we were all too young.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, it was all played at the Spirit Club, but Milo Ackerman came down and they did an encore of like Shut Down by the Germs and maybe some Descendant songs, and someone bumped open the door and the kids all ran in there.
Yeah.
But we all got thrown out really quick.
Yeah.
But like we were like, oh my God, we're in there. And then there's like Milo on stage with all, and they're doing a Germs cover. It was like,
wow.
holy shit.
Yeah.
But then we were bumped back out to the alley.
Not to keep riffing, but there was a time where you and I went to TJ to see Filth. Do you remember that?
No, I was there too, dude.
Yeah.
But
that was when the cops came.
Everyone was on acid except me. Were you on acid?
I was on
too?
acid now.
I don't think I was.
Dude, everyone was like, because Rick was with us and he gave everybody acid, and I was like,
Was Chris Squire there?
I don't know, probably if we were on acid.
So that show was intense too because it was
The DEA raided the place.
It was Dogma Mundista,
Yes.
Filth, and Solution Mortal,
Yeah.
but they had became like more like Slayer by then.
Uh-huh.
And the like Federales or DA or something.
Filth didn't
came
you
in.
get to play.
And I never got to see Filth because of it.
And they
I
pushed
loved Filth.
they pushed us all aside. They had like locals and then like the gringos on this side, and they were like, it was pretty sketchy for a while. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna get put in TJ jail? And then basically they just said like everyone from San Diego side can leave, and we all left.
Do you know what happened? So
they
they were
probably beat
carding everybody, and, and like I remember
You were under 18,
I had a fake ID, and they asked me my birth date, and I didn't know the fake one. And I was like, "Fuck!" And they're like, "You're going to jail." But someone had meth and tried to sneak out the window, and they shot him and killed him. So they let all of us leave.
And we just like booked back to the border.
Dude, we almost that was crazy.
I'm sure I was like I just had visions of like all the TJ locals getting beat by the
yeah.
Yeah, as soon as we all left. Yeah.
So
they
wait,
were
you never
dead.
saw Filth ever?
I never saw Filth. Yeah, that was my
Crossed
only
Out
chance
when
to
you were
see
in
Filth.
Crossed Out for a minute.
Uh-huh.
You guys played with Struggle and Filth at the Che.
Maybe I didn't see them. I don't know.
And Iconoclast.
That's they.
Yeah.
Iconoclast played that gig. That was when that's when I first met Ben. We brought them down. That was when we started like actually realizing we could set shows up, you know?
Yeah.
We were doing it. We were setting.
Was that when I was
parties
in
up.
Crossed Out?
I feel like you played bass in it.
bass
Crossed Out.
for a minute in that band.
Yeah. No. Right. I don't know if I played that show, but yeah,
Okay, well
it's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember then.
And
shortly
maybe
after-
I did see him and I'm forgetting, but yeah, I don't remember.
That same summer is like when we went up with probably End of the Line and Struggle up at Kent McLeod's show, and we were at his house, you know, looking at his cool records, and they were telling us about when Iconoclast and Filth stayed there, that they showed up and like pulled all this speed out and put it on his table and started to
In front of
Which is so fucking cool
Yeah.
compared to like, I mean, whatever. I don't do speed, but like that's just funny, like to do it around Kent.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate.
They were great though when they pulled up to the Che. It was the daytime still. It was like a daytime show, and the van door opened, and it was like that thing in it's like that scene in Fast Times, you know, when they like fall out.
Smoke comes
But like
out.
they fall out, the punkers fall out, and all these beer cans fall out, and like all the beer cans were like super expensive high end beer because someone worked at like a cannery or something.
Oh, really?
But they were just fucking wasted, and I was like, dude, these guys. And then they threw what's it called, razor blades into the crowd, and I was like, they're so cool.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that was
Right
fun.
on, man.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, I love you guys, man.
Cool,
Thanks.
It's been great.
Thanks for doing
Thanks for
this.
having
Thank
us.
you.
And
Yeah.
thanks for reissuing the record, man.
Yeah.
Thanks so
yeah.
much. That's awesome.
It's
So
it is a
happy with
privilege
it.
to have the Gravity stamp on something. Like,
Thank you.
I never got to put a record out on Gravity, so
It's also rad that it's just we're keeping it in San Diego.
Yeah.
Where it started, where it began, where it all happened, for the most part.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy we're doing that together. That's great.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cool.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
Awesome. There you have it, episode 26 of the Cult and Culture podcast. We'd like to say thanks to our sponsors, and also we'd just like to say, if you get a chance, check out Cory and Matt's work. It's pretty vast, but just check out all the stuff they've done. They're legends and awesome people, and their output into this world is incredible and very influential.
Lots of history there.
Hell yeah. So check out, Gravity Records for sure. And if you get a chance, pick up a copy of the End of Line record, which is co-released on Gravity and 31G. And check out our other podcast, wherever you stream your podcast from. It'll be there. And thanks.
Late.
Cult and Culture is a Ruinous Media podcast, proudly sponsored by Earthquaker Devices, Heartwork Coffee, Fender, and Diodario.
Planet B.